The Zlaska Consortium was a marvel of galactic bureaucracy, spanning 72 star systems and comprised of over a dozen sentient species, all of whom had, after meticulous Zlaska cost-benefit analysis, been deemed efficient enough for integration. The consortium prided itself on order, productivity, and the unwavering logic of the collective. Individuality was tolerated only insofar as it contributed to the quantifiable output of the whole. Hobbies, those peculiar, resource-draining activities pursued for mere personal satisfaction, were viewed with suspicion. And chief among these baffling human eccentricities was the concept of pets. To the Zlaska, an animal was either a food source, a labor unit, or a pest. The human practice of keeping non-productive creatures, feeding them, housing them, expending emotional energy on them, for no discernible return on investment, was a clear indicator of an undeveloped, inefficient, and frankly, rather sentimental societal structure. Humans, with their messy emotions and chaotic individualism, were generally categorized by the Zlaska as potentially useful Tier 4. Requires significant re-education and management. Envoy Kirk, a senior trade negotiator for the Zlaska Consortium, exemplified this mindset. His chitinous exoskeleton was impeccably polished, his multifaceted eyes missed no detail, and his internal chronometer was perfectly synced with the consortium's standardized efficiency cycle. He was currently aboard the Zlaska Trade Shuttle, Prophet's Ascent, en route to the human colony world of Haven, a remote agri-colony with a surprisingly robust output of certain specialized xenobotanicals the consortium desired. With him was Sub-Envoy Tealp, a younger, less rigid Zlaska, but one still thoroughly indoctrinated in the consortium's ways. Sub-Envoy Tealp, Kirk's voice was a series of precise clicks and words. Review the preliminary psych profile of the Haven colonists. Pay particular attention to subsection 7.3, anomalous attachments to non-productive fauna. Dutifully access the file on his datapad. Yes, Envoy. It states, Haven colonists exhibit a high prevalence of animal companionship. Species range from baseline Terran canids and felids to genetically engineered organisms designed for. His mandibles twitched in distaste, emotional support, and trivial entertainment. Precisely, Kirk clicked. A clear marker of societal immaturity. We must factor this inefficiency into our negotiations. They will likely attempt to barter based on sentiment rather than pure resource value. Be firm. Their journey to Haven was abruptly interrupted. As the Prophet's Ascent navigated the turbulent periphery of the Xylos Nebula, an unpredicted iron storm of ferocious intensity erupted. Alarms blared. The shuttle, designed for smooth trade routes, not cosmic tempests, was tossed about like a leaf. Despite the pilot's best efforts, critical systems failed. Envoy Kirk, the pilot shrieked, his voice several octaves higher than standard Zlaska calm. Navigation offline, propulsion failing, we are going down. The shuttle tore through Haven's atmosphere, a screaming meteor, and crash-landed, not without considerable violence, in a vast, muddy field several kilometers from the main settlement. The Zlaska, bruised and shaken, but largely unharmed thanks to their rigid exoskeletons and emergency gel cocoons, emerged from the wreckage into a world that smelled of alien rain, upturned earth, and wet fur. A large, four-legged creature with a shaggy brown coat was cautiously approaching, its head low, emitting a series of short, sharp vocalizations. Woofs, as Kirk's internal translator unhelpfully identified them. Behind it, a human figure in rugged, all-weather gear was jogging towards them. Well, now that's not something you see every day, the human, a woman with a weathered face and kind eyes named Sarah McGregor, said, more to her animal than the aliens. Shep, stay. The Shep, a Terran border collie, immediately sat, its intelligent eyes fixed on the Zlaska. You folks all right, Sarah called out. That was quite a landing. Kirk, regaining his composure, drew himself up. We are Zlaska Consortium. Our vessel has experienced a malfunction. We require assistance and communication with your planetary authority. Consortium, eh? Sarah said. Bigwigs. Well, Haven's pretty small time, but we'll do what we can. I'm Sarah. This here is Shep. She gestured to the dog, which offered a brief tail wag but otherwise remained still. Over the next few hours, as recovery teams from Haven's main settlement, Greenfield, arrived, Kirk and Tealp were exposed to the full spectrum of human-animal inefficiency. Almost every colonist seemed to have an animal in tow. There were more canids of various shapes and sizes, some herding ground-roaming avian livestock, sky chickens, into pens, others simply trotting alongside their human companions. Observed with bewildered optics, a small human child giggling as it was nuzzled by a creature that looked like an oversized Terran feline, but with tufted ears and paws almost the size of the child's head. A guardian Maine Coon, he later learned, a breed genetically enhanced for vigilance and apparently extreme fluffiness. One colonist, a bioengineer named Tom Chen, had a creature perched on his shoulder that resembled a Terran hawk, but with iridescent feathers and noticeably larger optical sensors. "This is Icarus," Tom explained, when Tealp couldn't help but stare. "He's my eyes in the sky. Helps me track fungal blight patterns on the crops from altitude." A pet with a minor utility, Kirk clicked to Tealp via their private comm. An anomaly, likely inefficient for the resources invested in its upkeep compared to a simple drone. The Zelaska were housed in a spare community building in Greenfield, while the colonists worked with surprising diligence to salvage what they could from the Prophet's ascent and attempt to repair its long-range comms. Kirk found the entire atmosphere profoundly illogical. Humans would pause their work to engage in petting or vocal reassurance with their animals. Food resources were shared. Prime sheltered space was allocated to these creatures. "It is a society built on sentimentality," Kirk concluded to Tealp. "Their productivity could be increased by at least 17.4% if these companions were reallocated to protein farms." Tealp nodded, though he found himself strangely fascinated by the way Shep, Sarah McGregor's dog, seemed to understand her complex, unspoken commands with mere glances. The Iron Storm, however, had done more than just down the Zelaska shuttle. Its massive electromagnetic pulse had surged through Haven's planetary crust, disturbing things that had lain dormant for generations. Deep in the uncharted Bloodwood forests, a creature of local legend, a nightmare whispered by the earliest colonists and then dismissed as folklore, began to stir. The Gravemaw, as the old tales called it. A colossal, six-limbed predator with armored plates, jaws that could crush plasteel, and a temperament that made a starving rancor look playful. The Iron Storm had, it seemed, given it a very rude awakening. The first sign of trouble was a series of seismic tremors, followed by the panicked screeching of wild forest creatures. Then, a remote sensor outpost near the Bloodwood border went silent. Sarah McGregor was conferring with Tom Chen and the colony mayor when the alert came in. "Mayor, Outpost 3 is offline, and those tremors, they're not geological." Tom's avian companion, Icarus, suddenly launched from his shoulder with an agitated shriek, circling high above Greenfield, its keen eyes scanning the horizon towards the Bloodwood. Tom watched its flight pattern on his wrist-mounted display. Icarus sees something, something big, moving fast. And oh, spirits of Earth, it's heading this way. Kirk and Tealp, observing the sudden flurry of human activity, initially assumed it was some local infrastructure failure. Then they heard the sound. A deep, guttural roar that vibrated in their carapaces, a sound that spoke of primal hunger and immense power. On the edge of Greenfield's cultivated fields, the tree line of the Bloodwood forest seemed to explode. The Gravemaw emerged. It was even larger than the legends described, a mountain of muscle and serrated chitin, its multiple red eyes burning with feral intensity. It let out another roar and swatted a fully grown hydro-oak aside like a weed. Panic erupted. Colonists screamed, grabbing their children, running for the central reinforced structures. This was not a threat their simple kinetic barriers or agricultural tools were designed to handle. Kirk's logical mind immediately assessed the situation. Catastrophic indigenous fauna event, human defenses, negligible, Probability of societal collapse, 89.9%. Our own survival depends on reaching the salvaged emergency beacon from our shuttle. He began to move, close behind. Then something astonishing happened. Something that wasn't in any Z-Lasker projection. As the Gravemaw began its lumbering charge towards Greenfield, Sarah McGregor didn't just run. She whistled, a sharp, piercing sound. Shep, who had been ushering a group of frightened children towards a shelter, instantly spun, barking orders that, to Cake's astonishment, other canids in the vicinity seemed to understand. The dogs fanned out, not attacking the Gravemaw, that would be suicide, but nipping at its heels, darting in and out, barking furiously, drawing its attention, breaking its charge, creating momentary confusion. It was a classic Terran herding tactic, scaled up to a monstrous degree. Illogical, Tealp whirred. They are sending their pets against that thing. But it wasn't just the dogs. Tom Chen, his face grim, was tapping furiously on his wrist control. Icarus, his avian scout, dived from the sky, not attacking, but letting out a series of high-pitched screeches directly into one of the Gravemaw's sensitive auditory pits, causing the massive creature to roar in annoyance and swipe at the air. Other, smaller avian companions, messenger hawks and pest-deterrent falcons, joined in, a feathered swarm of distractions. From the homes and barns, larger creatures emerged. Genetically modified Goliath hounds, usually gentle giants used for hauling heavy farming equipment, now stood their ground, their deep barks like thunder, forming a living barrier in front of the main residential block. And the guardian Maine Coons, those oversized felines Kirk had dismissed as fluffy indulgences, they moved like shadows. One, belonging to a young girl now safely sheltered, leaped from a rooftop onto the Gravemaw's broad back. It was far too small to do serious damage, but its surprisingly strong claws, designed to grip bark and traverse treacherous barn rafters, scrabbled for purchase on the thinner chitin between the Gravemaw's armored plates, near a cluster of what looked like neural ganglia. The Gravemaw bellowed in pain and surprise, twisting its massive body, trying to dislodge the clinging irritant. Kirk and Tealp had frozen, their escape forgotten. They were witnessing coordinated interspecies warfare. The humans weren't just fighting with their tools and their fists. They were fighting alongside, and in many cases directed by their animals. It wasn't a rigid Z-Lasker-style command structure. It was fluid, adaptive, almost symbiotic. The humans knew their animals' strengths, and the animals, through years of companionship, training, and perhaps something deeper, understood human intent. Sarah McGregor, armed with a heavy-duty tranquilizer rifle normally used for subduing agitated Grok's beasts, was coordinating not just her fellow humans, but the animal efforts too, using hand signals, calls, and whistles. She directed a pair of swift lure whippets to draw the Gravemaw away from a vulnerable power station, their incredible speed making them almost impossible targets. The Gravemaw, confused and enraged by the multitude of small, stinging, and surprisingly coordinated attacks from creatures it would normally not even notice, was being slowly but surely outmaneuvered. Its sheer power was undeniable, but it was being met with 1,000 pricks, a death by a multitude of tiny, loyal cuts and distractions. One of its massive legs buckled as a Goliath hound, sacrificing itself, managed to bite and hold a crucial tendon just long enough for a colonist with an industrial cutting torch to inflict a deep, searing wound. Finally, driven mad by the persistent, agile attacks, and with a well-aimed tranquilizer dart from Sarah's rifle beginning to take effect in its massive bloodstream, the Gravemaw hesitated. It looked at the small, defiant creatures and the equally defiant humans standing with them. This meal was proving far too troublesome. With a frustrated, gurgling roar, it turned and crashed back into the bloodwood forest, retreating to lick its wounds. Greenfield was battered but not broken. There were injuries, even a few human and animal fatalities, but the colony had held. And it had held not primarily because of its technology, but because of what the Z-Lasker had dismissed as inefficient sentimentality. Kirk and Tealp stood amidst the aftermath, their usually smooth carapaces covered in dust, their multifaceted eyes trying to process what they had seen. The pets, the non-productive fauna, had been the colony's first, and arguably most effective line of defense. They had shown courage, strategy, and an unbreakable loyalty to their human companions, who in turn had risked their own lives to protect and fight alongside their animals. Envoy Kirk, Teal'c finally managed, his voice several tones less certain than before. Though the human-animal symbiosis, it is unexpectedly potent. Kirk did not respond for a long moment. His logical mind was furiously re-evaluating millennia of Z-Lasker assumptions about lesser species and the value of emotion. He had witnessed a force multiplier he could not quantify with standard efficiency metrics. He had seen a decentralized, adaptable defense network born not of rigid training protocols, but of affection, shared experience, and interspecies understanding. It was terrifying. When the rescue ship from the Z-Lasker consortium finally arrived, summoned by the repaired emergency beacon, Kirk's report was unconventional. It spoke less of trade goods and more of human biosymbiotic legions. It described companion species exhibiting tactical coordination beyond all logical prediction. It warned that human pets were not liabilities, but potentially a highly adaptive, deeply integrated, and utterly unpredictable element of human societal strength. The word inefficient was conspicuously absent. The Z-Lasker consortium, and soon the wider galaxy, began to look at human colonies with a new, wary respect. Ships passing human settlements would often report seeing humans playing with their canids or tending to their varied menageries. Before, it was a sign of primitive frivolity. Now, it was viewed with a certain trepidation. What other inefficient human traits were actually hidden strengths? What other pets were actually highly trained, deeply loyal partners in some strange, organic defense matrix? The legend of Haven spread. The story of the farmers and their pets who had faced down a monster. Human applications for joining galactic protectorates, once viewed with skepticism, were now given serious consideration. After all, a species that could turn a fireside companion into a frontline defender, driven by nothing more than loyalty and a scratch behind the ears, was a species whose inefficiencies were worth a much, much closer look. The universe had just learned that when humans said, man's best friend, it wasn't just a quaint saying. It was a statement of potential, terrifying alliance.